There we are. I think that's the longest. You don't know, dear viewer, you don't know. That was the longest start ever this time, and the live yellow buttons only just come up. So good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world, dear viewer. It is autumn here in the Southern Hemisphere. Bruce and I are both suffering from it, along with Tian, who's drinking his beverage free there. Kenji and Sqn Ldr Gary James are in the Northern Hemisphere, so they're going into summer. It's good news for them. So welcome one and all. Thank you very much for joining. Let's kick off with Sqn Ldr James, who is in a part of the world I sort of know a little bit. 33 years ago, I went through Royal Air Force Shawbury, where I learned to make tea and coffee to a very low standard, and I've kept that up to this day. It's very important if you don't have to make a second cup. And RAF Shawbury obviously has a problem with drones, and to address that problem, they have generated a leaflet. And I know Bruce loves a good leaflet, so I had to have Sqn Ldr James on to discuss their safety brochure. So good evening to you, Sqn Ldr James. Perhaps you could explain to us how you arrived at creating this leaflet.
Evening, Gary. Evening, everybody else. Thank you for the invitation to participate. Yeah, I produced a leaflet. I'm a helicopter navigator by trade. A little bit of background. RAF Shawbury in England is the home of the Defence Flying School. So we train all the future helicopter pilots for the military in the UK, whether it be RAF, Army, Navy or Marine. And of course, I want to keep the area safe as I can for all the young pilots coming through. And like anybody, I keep an eye on technology, and I saw the rise of drones. I'm all for it. I think it's great technology. I've got a little one myself, although I can't fly it very well. It tends to crash and lose its rotor blades. But yeah, I'm all for the technology. The potential is huge. But of course, they fly in the same airspace that our young pilots fly in. And the size of them, they can be up to 20 kilos with the cameras. So just out of interest, I decided to do some investigating. And while I was looking to find out what the actual rules were, I had to keep digging and digging and digging. And eventually I found a drone code from the CAA. And I thought, well, if it takes me that long to find it, I can pretty much expect anybody who buys one off the shelf isn't going to spend that much effort looking for the rules and regulations. So I thought there's a definite gap there. So just to make it easier for everybody, I thought I'd produce a drone and a drone guide rather, and have it distributed to local retailers and available for anybody who wants one.
Wow, that's fantastic, and it's very interesting to hear that you found it hard to find the information, and that I think you've driven exactly to probably where I was going to try and take this, is the education piece, and it just isn't really happening. I don't know, Bruce, if you want to jump in at any time, because you're always pretty vocal about all this, but it's a very well presented leaflet, and I have to commend you for the distance graphics that you created. And I know that sort of thing's never easy, creating a piece of a graphic information that says what it needs to say quickly and concisely. How long did it take you to do that, or are you just a graphics genius?
Well, I'm very fortunate in that on station we've got a professional graphic designer, but fortunately the design I put down, he turned it into that leaflet in a matter of hours. So it was just a case of, I didn't want to replicate anything in error, so all the regulations, the rules and guidance have come from the CAA. And to give the CAA some credit, when I started this leaflet 3 years ago, it was very, very hard to find. They have worked on it. It is a little bit easier now, in fact, a lot easier to find it. So the information is out there on the Drone Aware website. On the other side of that leaflet, you've only got one side of it there. There's the what we call the low flying area around RAF Shawbury. So on the back of it, there you go, you got it. Because all the information on this CAA website is very generic. It has to be. Near to an airfield or any other such establishment. And of course, it's all well and good writing that, but if you're Joe Public and you buy a drone from a shop, unless you fly a large aircraft yourself or any sort of aircraft, you're not going to know where the aviation activity locations are. So I put that out there just to give them some idea, because people just simply wouldn't know.
Well, fair play to you. Fair play. And how have you distributed then? How's it been promulgated? You mentioned, did you mention local hobby stores then?
Yeah, well, there's two stores in Shrewsbury, Jessop's and Maplin's, the two national ones. So they're very keen to take it as well. But I've also been on the local and regional news about it, the local newspapers, local radio, and it's been on the RAF Shawbury Facebook page. So every time I go on anywhere, there's always a link to where they can get the leaflet from. So either I can send them a hard copy or they can just download it off their computer. So I'm trying to get the information out there. I know I'm not reaching everybody, but every time I do something to camera or on the radio, then a few more leaflets get sent out. The other thing I did as well, I'm also the flying display director. Anytime we have an air display at RAF Shawbury. And a few years ago at our Families Day, I had a request from a local lad who sells drones, the smaller kind. And first of all, when he asked me, could he sell drones at our Families Day, initially I said no, because I thought, well, flying drones next to an air display doesn't work. But then about 10 minutes later, I thought, do you know what? It's a perfect opportunity to get in at the coalface. So I rang back up. I said, look, I've changed my mind. You can come and sell your drones, but with a few caveats. You can only demonstrate them inside the hangar. Don't let anybody else fly them outside. But for everyone you sell, please hand out this leaflet and a copy of the CAA drone code. Because I figured if you sold 100 within a month, probably 95 will end up, up in the attic or on a garage roof or something. But if 5 people decide, do you know what? Oh God, this is great. I'm going to go out and buy a bigger one and a bigger one. At least they've been educated from the get-go. So that was the whole premise behind allowing them on camp. And he's been on the last 3 years now, and he sells dozens of drones each time, and every time they get the same leaflet.
I'm sorry, we're not used to the voice of authority speaking with some sort of reason and sensible argument. This is, I don't really have any response. That's fantastic. No, it is really, and it's how it should be. I'm gonna let, I know Bruce will have something to say. Bruce, can you jump in on this one now?
I can do my best. That's great. I really like that attitude, and the brochure actually is good too, because it's kind of there's a lot of images and not as much talking. I'll share my screen here if I can work out how to do this, because I'm going to show you what our Civil Aviation Authority has done. There we go, screen share. Let's have a look. Excuse me while I fiddle around, because I'm not very familiar with this. That's the brochure that our Civil Aviation Authority gives. It's such similar sort of thing, but see all the writing, lots of text, orange and green, and then they have the gall to tell us that these little toys are an aircraft, and it kind of sort of insults your sensibilities a little bit. But I think the one that has been shown, this one that we just saw, is brilliant. It seems to give everything you need, and as Gary said, the attitude is common sense. We're most unfamiliar with this from people who are involved in the aviation industry at an administrative level. You acknowledge the place of these things, and you acknowledge that we're, the technology's there, it's good. So many of the people that I'm dealing with are simply, oh, these are terrible, got to get rid of the damn things. There's no place for these in the air, and it's a refreshing change.
Oh, great, I'm glad to hear it. Thanks, Bruce.
No, fair play to you. I'm very impressed, and I'm sure. And well, I know I did want to ask you: is this rolling out across Air Force safety officers? Are you getting the word out amongst you? There's probably only 2 or 3 stations left, isn't there?
Well, earlier this year, I went to the RAF Station Flight Safety Officer Symposium. So everybody in my role, or every other flying station, we all met in one place. And one of the topics that came up was drones. And so I showed them the leaflets, and the uptake from Bryce Norton, from Benson, from Odium, from Linton, from Lossiemouth, they've all bought into it. And another way I've designed it is the information is going to be the same on the back side of it, but I've purposely designed it so the local flying area can be easily taken out and their local area put in. So it makes it pertinent for their local flyers.
That's a very, very, very smart idea. Have you actually had any incidents at RAF Shawbury? I know Benson has had an incident. Have you actually had any problems there?
Yes, we've had 3 close calls. Both, well, the first one was at 1,500 feet above a training area. that we use quite frequently. The second one was at 2,000 feet above ground level, and quite a big unit as well. So the guys were able to circle around it and get quite a good description. And then the third one, the most worrying one, was just about 2 months ago. One of our aircraft was turning finals to come back to the airfield, and literally just outside the fence, there was a drone at 800 feet, a large one, a large red and white one with a camera attached. They passed within about 50 meters of our aircraft.
Now, a lot of the drone world will now be your drone flyers jumping up and down and saying, impossible for you to see these things. I wonder if you seem to be the go-to sensible guy. I wonder if it's possible to actually film a civilian drone, of a standard civilian drone, and show us the video and show us what it looks like, and prove that you guys could see them in flight.
That would be the ideal. Of course, the last incident, the guys weren't expecting it, so and they were concentrating on landing the aircraft. And I spoke to the pilot again today because I knew I was coming on here, and he said, of course, it was the last thing he expected to see, particularly next to the airfield, because he didn't expect anybody to be flying a drone at 800 feet just outside the perimeter fence of a military airfield. So he said, first of all, he thought it was a bird of prey hovering. So that's what caught his attention. And it was only when he got closer and he saw the colours of it, and it was obviously man-made, is when he went, oh my goodness. Luckily, he was turning away from it. If he'd been flying straight and level, he would have hit it.
I didn't put that very well. What I meant was it'd be nice to set up a trial where we actually see these things filmed from helicopters, just to prove. A lot of people just say it's nonsense that as you fly you can see them, and they don't consider that a military crew is looking out for all sorts of threats as they're flying around. So if anyone's going to spot them, then it's going to be a military crew.
What about cockpit cam? I mean, we have these cheap dash cams that we put in cars now. Would it not make sense with the rising incidents to actually fit these two aircraft so that if there is an incident, we at least have some photographic evidence? And something that concerns me too is the traditional image of the people causing problems. Dimwits who buy a Phantom 4 online and go out and see how close they can fly to an airplane. But the kind of craft you're describing are a different genre. They're bigger, they are more sophisticated, or they're homemade. That sort of seems to fly in the face of what we as an industry perceive the threat to be. So have we got it wrong? Are the real threat perhaps not the ignorant recreational user, but perhaps pseudo-commercial or commercial users?
I can see where you're coming from, Bruce. I think because the smaller ones, the non-professional ones, they're so small, we could have had instances of an aircraft being close to one, but because they're so small, we wouldn't have noticed. So we don't know what we don't know, if that makes sense. I think the guys who fly the big ones, that in order to operate, they should have had the training and the license from the CAA to operate. So you'd like to think they would be a bit more savvy. But the three instances that we've had prove that that's not always the case. There's another location that we fly quite regularly from. It's one of our satellite fields, which I'm sure Gary's aware of. It's called RAF Turnhill. And just outside the fence line to Turnhill is a young offenders prison. And there's been regular occurrences of drones being found on the outside of the fence line there. And what's concerning for me is that prison is on the downwind leg of the circuit for our baby pilots. And Turnhill is a very busy airfield. You know, there's 15,000 movements a year there, and I think it's only a matter of time before something happens. The prison officers are really, really good. If they see something, they let our air traffickers know. And we've agreed that if any of our pilots see any activity, they'll report it via air traffic, and they let the prison know so they can react. So there's a good bit of to and fro there.
Just as a matter of interest, how many bird strikes would you get in a year?
I think last year we had about 7 bird strikes.
Well, I think, are you going, where are you going with that, Bruce? Are you going for there's millions of birds and only 50 drones, therefore they're never going to hit a drone? Where are you taking that bird strike data?
No, it was just something I wanted to know, because I'm trying to sort of gather as much information as I can. I know one of the factors, or one of the variables that's been included in some of the research study are the number of bird strikes, and they've tried to correlate that or extrapolate that to drone strikes and things. So I was just wondering, in a sort of setup like we're talking about, you know, whether there are bird strikes, if so, what the average is, because it's an interesting number to keep in the back of your mind.
Now, what's interesting about bird strikes, it's also useful data to know how much damage they cause, because there was an American Black Hawk 3 years ago, an American one that came down near the Wash on the eastern side of England. Unfortunately, killed all 4 people on board, and that's because they hit a goose. A goose is 3 or 4 kilos at most, and organic, but it came through the windscreen, killed both pilots straight away. Of course, the aircraft crashed, at low level, and all 5 sadly lost their lives. If you think these big drones are 20 kilos with the cameras attached, it's not a great leap to realize how much damage they could cause. And of course, if the weight doubles, the impact force actually quadruples. And I say the goose is organic and can cause a huge lot of damage. But of course, there's lots of metal bits and lithium batteries attached to drones. They're just going to accelerate into the cockpit.
And another thing. Well, are you happy with? I mean, there have been instances where people have been caught flying in the wrong places. Are you happy with the kind of punishment that the authorities are metering out? I tend to think they're a bit limp-wristed and a bit light on it, because they don't really. These are really life-threatening situations, and people seem to almost get away with murder. There's no real harshness to the penalties. What do you think?
I agree, and sadly, I think it's going to take a proper incident or an accident for something to happen about it. I can understand that the police are probably a little bit reluctant. The CIA don't have the manpower. The police are the guys empowered to intervene, but they have to catch the person in the act, and it's a judgment call. If they go up and someone's just doing it out of ignorance, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know, then just point them in the right direction. But if someone is caught and they're flying with malice, they're somewhere they shouldn't be, and they know they're somewhere they shouldn't be, then I agree with you, Bruce. I think something needs to be done. There needs to be a high-profile prosecution and get the message out there that it's not something you can just do willy-nilly.
It's I think what we've got to remember with particularly military aircraft, I think light aircraft, other than takeoff and landing, they're a bit of a simpler situation than military aircraft. And military aircraft might very well be at low level and then meet something coming around the corner in a valley, and with a lot less options to get out of the way and things like that. And it's beholden on the part of our community to consider that, and not to just to stolidly believe we have a right to be wherever we like to be and do whatever we want to do. We have to play friendly. And I hope, well, of course, our dear viewer here, of course, dear viewer, you would never ever do anything other than that. But Sqn Ldr James, did you manage to identify any of those drones at all, and those drone users?
Not the second two, the first lot we did, and believe it or not, it was the army the first time round. It just shows it was the infantry on the ground using a drone as part of their exercise above the training area. So they'd spoken to the camp commandant and said what they were doing, but they didn't think to let anybody else know. So it's not just members of the public who are not aware of the rules. It's also certain members of the armed forces as well. If I could just go back to the bit about filming a drone, just to show how difficult it is to spot. Just on the road from us here at Shawbury, we've got Harper Adams University, an agricultural university, and they're at the forefront of drone development for agriculture. And the chap in charge of the development there is a good friend of mine now. He's been very proactive in keeping us informed. So he always tells us when they carry out experiments. So I went to a meeting that they had there, a big symposium, because they're looking at using drones for various aspects of agriculture, one being crop spraying for inaccessible fields and so on. So my concern is that at Shawbury we have 79 fields and clearings that local landowners very kindly let us use to land our aircraft on and carry out our exercises. Lots of them are next door to farms and crop fields. And so my concern is that in the future, if you've got these large drones crop spraying, it'd be very useful to know where they are, and so we can see them, so we don't overfly them, tip them over, or cause any issues without downdraft. So I suggested that we had a conspicuity trial. They were very well on board. They said, "Yeah, great, we'll do that." And so they set up a very controlled scientific experiment. So myself and a colleague flew our helicopter over. We knew exactly which field the drone was in, and they had different light settings on it. So no lights on it at all, a constant light, a flashing light, and then the one that actually worked the best were what I call Audi indicators, like LEDs running along the arms of the drone, and that was what the design that actually worked best. But we knew exactly which field they were in, and even when we were coming in on the dummy runs and even during the experiment, it was very, very difficult to see the drone. And of course, it's a different perspective for us, because if you're on the ground looking up, you've got nice blue sky behind you or white clouds, and you're looking at your drone, you can see everything. You can see other aircraft. It's very easy to see from the ground. Of course, from the sky, you're looking down, everything's camouflaged. Everything blends into the background. And of course, we're always looking out for other aircraft, we're looking out for birds, we're looking out for wires, we're looking out for livestock, we're looking out for chicken sheds. We avoid everything we can, towns, hamlets, villages. So in order to spot a drone, even when you know where it is, exactly which field it's in, it was nigh on impossible.
Well, that is interesting. I'm very impressed. I'm more impressed. I see my gob's even further smacked now. It's great that you're doing this work. Has this work been? How is this being shared or promulgated? Then that would have been a very interesting trial for SUS News, and in fact, it'd be very interesting to have your mate back to come and talk to us about that as well. I'd love to hear all about that.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think a lot of it is commercial in confidence because of where they are, and I'm sure in a year's time he'd be more than happy to release more information. But what was great about the symposium that they held at Harper Adams was that one of the main manufacturers of agricultural drones from Holland was there. And first of all, he said, well, we don't need to make our drones conspicuous. They're just utilitarian vehicles. But then when I described why it would be useful, he was like, yes, yeah, I get it. Yeah. So he was going to go back to his company in Holland and incorporate anything of use that this trial would throw up.
No, that's very cool. There's two pieces really to identification to stuff that you might see in the air. One piece is ADS-B that you can now retrofit. That is available in a small size. So that's one side of the drone identification coin, and the other side of that coin is the one that Kenji's is trying to speak to, and that is a place that you're in. So you've identified some of the drones that are Army users. Well, there's no accounting for that, is there? But the other ones you didn't find who they were. And Kenji, you've submitted a white paper that deals with almost number plates for drones. I've not unpacked that very well. Perhaps you could do a better job than I've just done.
Sure. So just as a little bit of background, I'm a lawyer in the United States, or barrister, where you may be at. And one of the things that I do is I actually advise the Oregon legislature. So I advise them in their rulemaking, and during the discussions about the laws that they're generating, one of the biggest frustrations that they've come out with is you might pass this law, but without being able to identify the drone user, it's pretty much useless, because what happens is, say, for example, there's a drone flying low, harassing somebody or annoying somebody. Usually by the time law enforcement shows up, it's long gone. And that happens everywhere. It's not only personal property, but also, for example, military installations. It's a big issue. You also have sightings where people say, oh, there was drones doing this and that, but there's no real proof that it was, besides a third party saying, I just saw it. Whereas if you have an in-air identification scheme, that functions as sort of proof. So it gives credence to, for example, the pilots that saw it. With that in-air ID, they got that identification. They say, okay, it was around 300 feet or 100 meters off my wing. This is the identification number. It gives credence, and then it's possible to track down that person. Also, same thing with the personal side, having that drone ID. A normal person could just capture that ID, and they take that to law enforcement to look up who owns it. So there's a degree of accountability involved in that. And what's also nice about that is you hear these stories about people shooting down drones. And part of that, the genesis of that is that people feel powerless. They see something flying low, they think it's bothering them. Their only avenue right now is the idea that there's self-help, so they'll shoot it down. Whereas if there's a drone ID, they might say, oh, okay, I won't shoot it down. I can take it to law enforcement who will take care of it. Now, the sort of idea that I created was a sort of a short range type of identification scheme. And the reason we want that is we don't want people to sort of track where the drones are always going. You don't want any sort of big brother. And it should be an open standard. So just a homeowner, a person off the street sees some dangerous activity, they could pick up their cell phone and just grab the ID out of the air. We chose Bluetooth 5.0 as a standard because we thought it was universally accessible to everybody, and it's commonly available throughout the world. It's easy. We did some preliminary testing because some people told us, oh, it's too short of a range. But some testing just with a cell phone, we were getting around 600 feet. With a Yagi antenna, we were getting over 1 kilometer before we turned back because we didn't want to lose sight of the drone itself. The other component too is the identification number should not be able to be linked directly to that pilot and their personal information. So Joe Schmo off the street can't look you up just because they saw their drone, go knock on your door and take some self-help. It should only be authorized users who should be able to do that cross-reference. For example, law enforcement or any other authorized, or an attorney perhaps, could do that. Just because we don't want to have that self-help mechanism too. So that's just this general framework we're looking at. Just the top things are the separation of the pilot data from the license, and then also universal accessibility, and inexpensive too.
I was just going to say Bluetooth 5, that sounds to me something that when you register over there with the FAA for your $5 to be that person, it almost sounds like something that could fit within that $5 or maybe just a little bit more. It doesn't sound like it's going to be super expensive. Isn't that going to upset some people who will be wanting to create a system that's a little bit more expensive, therefore allowing them a little bit more leeway to skin a little bit off the top?
Well, I think there's a couple ideas behind this. The Bluetooth is only part of the solution, and I think it's perfect for low altitude operations, for the recreationals, the commercials that operate between 400, below 400, or actually I'd say 166 to 100, 200 meters or so. And then above that, you could layer on top of that a layer where it requires Bluetooth and ADSB. Because what that does is, of course, the ADSB system is not created to take thousands and thousands and thousands of signatures. So if you reserve that for only the higher altitudes, you're going to cut down on the number of ADSB signatures that you're going to find. So they can have that space up. Go ahead.
So if we're tooling along, so the ADSB to my mind is a fairly good fit because the aircraft already have the equipment to detect the aircraft and it's fitted. So an aircraft, Sqn Ldr James would need to have a Bluetooth receiver on board the aircraft that would alert him in different directions that there is a threat. But because there's no, you're not linking it to the GPS or anything like that, it would just be a radio threat in a given direction. Is that your thinking at low level?
My thinking is that again, when I thought that Bluetooth 5.0 actually has a payload that you can include on it. So what could happen is, say for example, it's baked into the circuit board for a DJI unit or a unique unit or any other unit. You can take that GPS information, which includes location, speed, and altitude, and output it through that Bluetooth as that payload. Okay,
so you're creating a new low-level ADSB system, almost.
Yeah, that's universally accessible and cheap.
Yeah, and cheap. So you're in the wrong industry. That's why it's going to fail. The and cheap part, no, that'll never stand. You've got to lose that. You've got to lose that thinking straight away. Bruce, you've got a detect, sense, and avoid system on the bubble. What do you reckon to this?
In theory, it sounds like a good idea, but I have a feeling we're going to get a lot of these reinventions of the wheel, sort of pseudo ADSB systems that, because any man and his dog can come up and design one and then push it out there. But this will only work if there is a universal standard that is adopted by everybody, and that's going to be the hard bit, getting everyone to adopt it. The other problem is it's still open to abuse. For example, if this goes ahead, anyone wanting to do something nefarious with a drone will simply go onto Craigslist or eBay, buy a second-hand drone, pull what amounts to a transponder out of that, and put it in their own one, so that when someone grabs their reader and says, "Oh, this is drone number 7566117," it's not traced back to the actual operator, but to the person who sold the second-hand drone 3 months ago. There's a whole lot of issues because the number isn't actually locked to the drone. This technology can be shifted over. The other thing is, as I mentioned in one of my vlogs recently, DJI already has a unique number being broadcast from all of its drones that are fitted with Lightbridge. It has a global, universal global identifier, a GUID, which is a number that is attached to every packet of video signal that comes back from the drone. And that's unique to each drone. So there's already facility to build a reader that can read that, and you can identify the drone uniquely. And so I suspect that it's going to be a difficult job to make this the universal standard that everybody wants, because there's going to be too much competition, too much noise in that bottom end of the marketplace. Because it is so cheap to make these things, every man and his dog will be pushing to have their standard adopted and their product adopted. So it's a difficult one. And of course, then you've got to realize as well that where does this kick in? Because you've got little tiny toy drones. There's a 250 gram cutoff at the moment, but if you've got a 251 gram drone, what's going to encourage a manufacturer to include this technology? And that drone adds a little bit of weight, adds a cost. Even if it's cheap, it still adds cost. There'll still be drones on the market that don't have this stuff. Do you make them illegal? It's a real rat's nest, isn't it?
I don't think so. Going back to the DJI in terms of the inclusion of that information, I think the biggest issue there, of course, is you need specialized equipment to detect it. And as I mentioned before, the idea is really to democratize the detection in terms of allowing anybody with a cell phone to pick it up. And I think that's the major issue, because you want to assuage the public. And that's going to help immensely with public perception too. Is
there enough of a problem? Sorry, Bruce. After you.
No. I just thinking. There's still the problem that if you've got two drones operating in the same area, how do you know which one you're picking up?
So with that being picked up, the GPS coordinates included in the payload. So the structure that I envision is that there's a screen that an authorized user would look at, which would include precise GPS location, speed, altitude, etc., and then a non-authorized version, which would be your normal citizen looking at. They'd be able to look at approximately where the drone would be within, say, 100 meters or so, just to make sure that they're looking at the correct drone. And then what can also happen is the law enforcement officer can look at that information, and if they can find out whose drone it is, they can look at the logs too. There was that issue you brought up of non-compliant drone users in terms of them being able to go on eBay and grab that information from anybody else. That's not going to be the vast majority of people. I think the big issue are the recreationalists or the commercial folks who have no clue and are out flying and doing dumb things, flying in no-fly zones, flying in controlled airspace without notification. And those are the ones we are really trying to pick up on, and to educate them and really perform a public service in that sense. The non-compliant users, they're going to be a smaller subset, and there needs to be other ways of identifying them too.
Okay, I've got several drones which weigh well over a kilo and have no GPS capability. Are they going to be illegal?
Not necessarily. I mean, there are some issues that we still do need to work through. I presented in paper 3 options of how to deal with that. The first one is that as of a certain date, all drones manufactured need to have this capability. to have it so that all drones after a certain date have to have a small transceiver, and of course there can be weight limits too. There could be exemptions for homebrews as long as you have some sort of capability to just have that beacon on there, and there could be detection through RSSI, not necessarily have the exact GPS coordinates. But there are a lot of options in it. It's not all baked in terms of what needs to be done. So anything that you can help with the device would be highly appreciated.
Yeah, a lot of the functionality. I mean, when I looked at doing my sense and avoid, I built in a beacon system, transponder system, as I expected that there would be a demand for that. But I think the problem we've got to look at is identifying the problem users, the people who cause the problem. And when we listened to Squadron Leader talking before, the drones that he was having problems with weren't the Phantoms. They weren't the consumer-grade drones. They were either commercial or they were home-built or something, or operated by the military. So if they, in some areas, are the problem we're dealing with, this approach is obviously not going to address that, because they won't have transponders in them unless people choose to put them in. And I suspect if someone's going to create mischief, they're not going to go and incriminate themselves by putting a transponder in. So yeah, it's a great concept, and I mean ADSB in the full-size world sort of proves that. I just think that we need to get some backing from someone like the FAA or the various authorities. Have you approached the FAA or any sort of government organisation who's in a position to mandate this standard, and got any feedback from them?
Yeah, actually, I did give this to Hoot Gibson probably in 2015 before the FAA Reauthorization Act. And since then, I also gave it to Loretta and a couple other folks. And quite recently, it's being passed around the global UTM. So people are taking a look at it. I know PK over at NASA Ames is also taking a look at it too. So the major players in the United States, at least, are aware of it, and it is a potential solution that's being looked at. It might not end up being in final form, but it's just a concept that has sort of gained a little bit more traction.
I notice as a sort of semi-aside that the new thing, I've forgotten what it's called, that new AirEnvironment little tiny thing that's come out today, been launched today, has a software-defined radio in it. And one of their reasons or abilities to export it is the SDR falls outside of any ITAR regulations or anything like that. So as soon as you say the thing's got an SDR radio on board, there's no end of radio trickery that could happen with that in the modern world. I think that's a more important headline from that launch today than the actual quad itself. The quad is a quad, and it's got a camera. That's great. But the SDR radio and radio fit, that's very, very interesting. Very interesting. And it means, of course, that AirEnvironment are in the ability to, or will have the ability to make that machine comply with whatever country's regulations occur without changing out that radio module. They'll just be able to do it in software. Anyway, I've ranted on a little bit. Back to you, Bruce, to start ranting on more.
No, I never rant, you know that. But you're right, Gary, SDRs are the future. My Sense and Avoid has 3 of them because they can send on any frequency, they can receive on any frequency. It opens up a world of possibilities. And as you say, it's transborder. You can comply with all the regulations in all the different countries. So that's the way to go. And again, Bluetooth is locking you into that little band of frequencies, remembering that's a very noisy part of the spectrum. I know that Kenji did tests and got up to 1 kilometre with the Yagi, but the average person with a cell phone in a very noisy environment where there may be Wi-Fi, there may be, well, there's a radio control transmitter going on. I'd like to see some more real-world tests as to how practical that is. And I wonder also where our real problem is. I think our real problem is the interaction between drones and full-size aircraft. I don't care if some lady is concerned that she can see a drone half a mile away from her backyard and it's probably spying on her with a high-powered camera. We all know that is a very common situation, but it's pretty much dream world stuff. It doesn't happen in reality. I think that we've really got to focus on the real threat, which is aviation full-size versus drones. In that respect, I don't expect pilots to be carrying around their cell phone looking for drones as they're flying. It has to be integrated into existing systems or new systems that will span the entire range of the aviation spectrum. So it's a big challenge. It's a really big challenge, and we can't have one little solution for this part of the chat problem, one solution for this part, one solution for that part, because then there's too many different components and people will say, I can't be bothered. We need a single solution that covers the whole spectrum and that works for all the important applications. So yeah, it's an interesting challenge. I'm looking forward to seeing what the future brings.
Yep. And I tend to disagree a little bit in terms of the little old lady, because when those little old ladies squawk to the legislators actually listen. And unfortunately, one of the regulations that was put forth this session was because we had a complaint. So that has a huge impact in terms of policy. And if you get enough of those people, it does become an issue. The other piece too is I think we're talking about two different things, which is traffic management, which is the separation of aircraft and collision with unmanned aircraft too. I think that's very, very, very important, and that's why there needs to be sort of a layered structure where the ADS-B is a component of higher flying UAS, because that does. I think you're absolutely right that safety is absolutely paramount. But at the same time, we need to offer a way for people on the ground to identify the UAS easily without having to buy expensive equipment. So I think there's two different things that we're talking about, and I think there is sort of a nexus between them, but I think there can be multiple solutions for different uses.
And I think we've seen the crazy situation of a Patriot missile being fired against a small quad. So
Yes.
if you wanna talk the money discussion, that was probably 2,000 pilots worth of a detection system, of a little $6 or $7 detection system in one Patriot missile. But Squadron Leader James and his station safety officers need something that isn't Patriot missiles ringing their airfields, and the ability to detect who the people are. And I'm going to ask a question. What would you, Squadron Leader James, what would you do should you come across a transgression? Is it a matter of education, or are you slamming them in jail? What would your preferred option be? I suppose you can't really answer that. I'll see if you do.
Oh, it's very interesting listening to Kenji and Bruce there. I agree with both sides of the argument there. Conspicuity is a big thing, whether it be physical conspicuity or electronic, because if we can see the drones, then we can avoid them. And I like the idea of making someone accountable. So if you make an identification scheme, but legal, so somebody is accountable, someone's going to be less inclined to fly the drone where it shouldn't be if they know that if it doesn't come back, someone will be coming to knock on the door. But like with anything, we've just held a General Aviation Day at RAF Shawbury, which I hosted, and it's difficult enough getting other aviators, so light aircraft flyers, to put conspicuity electronic equipment on their aircraft, because it all comes down to cost, whether it's £600 or £2,000. And what it needs is legislation, because unless it's mandated, people aren't going to do any of these things. You get the minority who will like to do it, but then the majority, unless they're enforced to do it or mandated to do it, they're not going to. And the biggest gripe I get from a few drone operators is that anything that you say you'd like to have them on their drone, they say, well, no, that's weight. If I've got any extra weight on my vehicle, then it's not going to fly as long, and I need it. I need the battery life to carry out the role that I'm doing. And so until the government legislation catches up, then I can't see there's going to be a great deal of development. It will come eventually. I think it's going to take an accident for it to come. So in the meantime, you did mention yourself, it's education. That third example I mentioned about the drone being flown at 800 feet just outside our perimeter fence. Unfortunately, the guy who saw it, he was on finals, as I say. But he landed the aircraft, taxied it back, and when he got back to the squadron, then he rang air traffic and said, "Oh, by the way, there's a drone operating." So of course, as soon as air traffic knew, they rang me. I rang the police, both the RF police and the civilian police. But in that time, 15 minutes had passed. And so they got to the location and there was no sign of the chap. So it's an education piece for us as well. So all the baby pilots are now told, if you see a drone, report it on the radio straight away, which will give us a chance to go out and intercept these people on the ground and educate them. You know, we're not going out to arrest them. We're not going out to lock them up. We just want to point out the error of their ways and hopefully they won't do it again. And of course, if they do it again, then we won't be so light-hearted or light-handed the next time.
I thought you were going to come back with a reasonable answer as to what you're going to do. And education is the way forward. So what is the general advice? If you're able to tell us, is there a modern sort of advice for military aviators and civilian drones? What do you look out from in certain areas? Do you expect them in certain areas? Or is it just something that's talked about in the crew room?
Well, the crews are aware, and you know, just yesterday morning, I went to one of the squadrons and gave a full brief on drones, and just remind them that there's no substitution for lookout. And you know, you can have all the electronic kit in the world, but it's beholden on both sides having the electronic kit, and more importantly, as Bruce says, there's so many different systems out there. There has to be some interoperability, but there's no substitute for lookout. You know, if the guys are flying along, they need to have eyes on stalks in the low-level environment. And expect the unexpected. And you know, going back to Bruce's point, yes, even with all that lookout, we still get bird strikes. So you can't avoid everything all the time. I just hope that it's not going to be a major event.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Certainly, I think that's the industry's feeling as well. Because at the end of the day, it's really bad for your bottom line if you've got a commercial company and you're operating and you cause an accident. It's really going to affect your business, and you don't want to be doing that. Kenji, we've been really hard on you, I think. So I'm sorry, it's very rude, very rude. First time we've been here.
No. That's actually a good thing because it makes me think, and it goes through some of the issues that are faced. So the question then becomes how to solve them, and then whether we can do that through technology. So it's actually a very good conversation.
I think Bruce was onto something with the data that's sent with certain brands. That's the trouble, is of course it's certain brands of aircraft send certain sorts of data, and I'm sure it wouldn't be beyond the ken of man to have an SDR. I think the main trouble with a lot of SDRs is they wouldn't quite hit the frequency range, but there are ways around that, and then make the manufacturer say, give the algorithm for decoding what's coming down in that data stream to your police officers or whomever the authorized person is, so that they could just have a receiver that would then, well, see the video stream or see whatever, you know, that but of course that wouldn't identify the actual operator. That would identify the aircraft, and that's a separate thing, isn't it? I'm thinking aloud and it's not working, is it? So I'm impressed with your ideas, and what stage are you at? Is it still just on paper with a couple of trials, or are you moving to sort of a production unit, or how it might look, or how it might roll out?
It's just testing. The biggest thing is just getting the concept out there in front of the right people to just explore it further. And of course, there's the UASID ARC that's looking at technologies. And I'd definitely be interested in participating. I put in my application a number of weeks ago, but as far as I understand, that process is taking a while to actually select those people.
And I wonder how that selection process is going to work. I wonder how that's going to work.
I have no idea.
Yeah, let's hope people with the biggest pockets aren't the people that to end up sitting on yet another ARC. That would be really bad news, because there is money to be had in this, and this is my sort of biggest worry about this. Is a sort of the 15-year-old who wants to eventually go through the military flying system and become a proper professional pilot, but he might well start with that Phantom or whatever, and any extra cost for him is not a good thing either. Him or her, I should say.
Yes,
that's not a good thing, and I worry that people are. There's a bit of a queue forming to try and extrapolate cash from this system. Of course, Bruce is in that queue with his detect, sense, and avoid. But anyway, what can we say about that?
So one of the primary concerns I always had with the UTM, which I brought up back at Drone World Expo a number of years ago, is I asked them, the NASA folks, whether it would be a pay-to-play system to actually enter the airspace, and would it be, in essence, a privatization of airspace? Because that was my primary concern, because I don't want to pay to fly. I understand paying into a system, but every time I fly, I don't want to have go ka-ching, 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 paying somebody out the nose, especially if for a recreationalist, as you said, or some students or educators who want to show kids how to fly, having to charge them. I don't think that's appropriate, because we really want to be encouraging that with especially our young people. So that was.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a red flag that needs to be waved. I don't think people are realizing what might be coming down the path for them if we're not careful. This is the situation we might go, and unfortunately, in the defense of the drone world, there will be the lever. These incidents and accidents will be the lever that allows pay-to-play airspace, and that'll be really bad news. But you're saying no. You're saying no, Kenji.
No, I'm agreeing with you 100%.
Okay,
I'm not pay-to-play.
Okay, I'm just worried that that's what's going to happen. We'll wake up one day, and of course it makes great sense for regulators. They can, there's, I don't know how many manned pilots there are in America, but just registered, just the people that have bothered to register the $5. It's 770,000 people now in America have registered their interest, if you will, in having a drone, and they may have more than one aircraft. So that's big numbers, and I suspect that's already surpassed manned aviation over there. Look, the time's getting on. It's 9 minutes to the hour, and I haven't even said hello to Tian properly, because let's just bring it down to the basics of things. Are you still there, Tian, while I'm doing that? No point going here if he's not there. Let's assume he's not there. All right. So I'm assuming he's not there. Oh, no, he is there. He is there. Everybody wants to build a Spitfire, don't they? Come on, let's all admit it. That's what you got to have. I even saw one in the background with Sqn Ldr James there. Tian, how is the Spitfire build going on?
Well, very slowly at the moment. Still figuring out the printer for the most part, the 3D printer. We bought that Spitfire from 3D Lab Print. I think it was $15 or $20 or something like that. We're supposed to print it in PLA filament, which makes it a hell of a lot easier to print. But I have been attempting it in a different type of more tricky plastic that'll last in the African sun. It's getting along. I'm quite impressed with this one piece of one thing that I've printed so far in terms of the design of this. It's just very well thought out, and it's surprisingly strong for a 1 millimeter thick skin over the support structure. So no, overall, it's a very impressive design from those guys in I think it's Czech Republic. So yeah, no, hopefully in the next couple of weeks we'll have a full one printed and flying on your end.
Well, that's fantastic, because we're working on some 3D printed flying projects, especially on that VTOL thing, Bruce. Remember that VTOL thing? And of course, we're printing them in conspicuity. I had to say that slowly, orange for Sqn Ldr James. Is there any other stories this week that have caught anybody's eye before I put the gavel down on today?
Yeah, the drone crashing into the bike race.
Oh, of course, you with the bike on the back. Of course, you want to talk about that. Yeah, that was all right. So, with your lawyerly head on, what basic? There must be rules. If all right, it wasn't a drone that flew into him. I threw a stick from the side, and it went through the spoke, and it caused that accident. What could happen to it? Surely, must be the same rules.
Yep, it's well, that would be an intentional act for certain. If you threw that would probably be a criminal act at that. But in terms of a drone flying into crashing and then flying into a bicycle wheel, that seems more like negligence, or even I'd even call it reckless. So under the FAA's regulations, I think that could be considered reckless. And of course, for the cyclists, at least, they'd be able to recover damages against the pilot for their negligence or at least recklessness.
Now, some people are saying that the event organizers might face a little bit of flack about that as well. How would that work?
Well, the way the legal system in the U.S. works is the plaintiff's attorney or barrister will always sue everybody that they can. So they will sue the operator, they will sue the promoter, they will sue the sanctioning body. So even if they weren't at fault, they'll be included in the lawsuit. They'll incur costs for representation. But plaintiffs' attorneys always go for the deeper pockets. And in the case of a recreational hobbyist who's probably flying, they probably don't have the deep pockets, so they will continue to go after the sanctioning body or whoever carries the largest insurance policy. So that's
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I've seen an alarming. No, it's putting my old duffer head on. I still like the oldest man in the room, but an alarming number of people leaving comments of LOL and all crazy cyclists and all that sort of thing, and they really are making light of what could have been quite a serious little accident for that chap, and justifying the action of the flying. And again, a broken record. It's all the way back. Safety is all the way back round to the education piece and how you fly from day one. It's not. It's all to do with attitude, and no amount of gizmos on aircraft are going to change that. Bruce, I think you're starting or considering starting a school over there to teach safety. Is it going to be your standard rules, which I think we should have again now?
Yeah, there will be my standard rules, because safety is attitude as well as regulation. Regulation goes so far, but without the right attitude, regulation is ineffective, because people can ignore regulations as and when they choose. So yeah, I'm addressing the problem by putting a lot of effort into education, because people can't follow rules they don't know about. And an educated person with the right attitude is a safe person. The regulators just take the very, very simple approach, which is, let's just find a way to punish people when they do something wrong. I prefer to say, let's try and teach people what's right and what's wrong, and show them how they can avoid doing wrong things. Solve the problem by eliminating the cause rather than treating the symptom, which is bad things happening. And hopefully it'll work, but I've got a bit of work to do yet. And look, cat.
Thank goodness we can put this on Facebook now. There's a cat involved. Brilliant. Hold on, Bruce. After all. Brilliant. I hadn't thought about that. Brilliant. Well, that very nicely brought us all the way back round to Sqn Ldr James, who saw an issue in that information wasn't there, and he made it available, and he made it available in a clear and concise way that does what it says it should do on the tin. So it sounds real brown nosy, doesn't it? But I'm very impressed, and I'm very glad to hear that that's rolling out across Royal Air Force stations, and that there's a sensible approach being taken to this as well. It's give and take on both sides, and at the moment I feel the drone world's taking a little bit more than giving, and hopefully we can start addressing that. Kenji, we were a bit rude to you. Thank you very much for coming along, and there is going to be some sort of system like this, and I'm very glad that somebody at least is considering the lesser man, as it were, in this whole big scheme, and can see the bbigger picture of what might happen if we're not careful, or what might be allowed to happen. Now, you're also part of the DUG, aren't you? You're the I'm going to read it here, the policy director for the DUG, as I have to say. I know now I have to say the DUG and then add the N on the end. So hopefully they won't have to take that up as an issue moving forward. And Tian, keep printing stuff. So with that, see, I'm trying to be a DJ and go right down to the last minute. So with that, dear viewer, it leaves me just once again to say thank you very much to everybody for taking the time out to come and speak to us this evening. It's been great. I'll put links in the bottom to Kenji's project and any other things we've spoken about, and also the leaflet, of course. Thank you very much. Subscribe, like, do all those other things you're supposed to do here. We shall adjourn again at 2100 to GMT, same time, same bat channel, next Tuesday. Thanks very much, everyone. Thanks for your time. Thank you.